29th, 2023 special meeting of the City Council and Planning Commission is called to order. The time is 6 p.m. Before we begin, council members and commissioners, please put away cell phones. If you have personal business during the meeting, please move for a recess. If you are participating telephonically, please mute your phone unless speaking. Also, when speaking, please state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder to all attendees, this meeting is being streamed live. The camera is located directly in the back of the council chambers above the clock. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Brown is absent. I do expect him. Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Rubio.
Here.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard is absent and excused this evening. Councilmember Velock.
Here.
Commissioner Crafton.
Here.
Commissioner Cottle.
Here.
Commissioner Sage L.
Who called in?
Yeah.
He's participating with us telephonically. Commissioner Seals
Present.
and Commissioner Stafford.
Here.
You do have a quorum of both bodies, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Stafford, if you would lead us.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. The first item of business is approval of the agenda. Are there changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand as amended, or as approved. Sorry. We are now to public participation, persons to be heard. It's a time for members of the public to share their views with the body. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the body or administration. So, Holly, you're going to have to move.
premature.
Yeah, I will.
You point all that out, Mr. Clark.
Verne Rupright, if you would please state your first and last name, then you are limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Verne Rupright, city resident. I'm also a former planning commissioner, chair under the Palin administration. When standards like for, putting in the infrastructure for grass, gardening, landscaping, and all the rest, we put a lot of hours in, lots of hours. Charrettes, a lot of investment. In fact, if I recall, Bert Lent, and a lot of people might, he was the landscape architect for the city. He was under contract. It actually was the guy that designed the Idita Park over there. And the goals at that time was to clean the town up, because for those of us who've been here a lot of years, I mean, a lot of things with a lot of dust, broken rock, buildings thrown up, and the attitude and the opinion of the public at that time was like they like to have something a little more aesthetic to live in and more valuable, thus keeping the property values going up. So when you consider any changes, modifications, fine, that's what you got to do sometimes. But you should keep in mind all the work that was done in the past. And I know there's one map back there about the couplet. That was a program going on with the state and with the borough and the feds for years. And Murph O'Brien was the engineer with the state. Then he was with the borough. And we had meetings over the firehouse when I was sitting in the chair that Glenda Ledford sitting in. And finally, and that was a while back now, it looked like we've got a project and we still haven't fired the thing off. We did the original EIS test holes. Governor Parnell gave us the money to do it, which was really good of him. It was very expensive, and hopefully that thing is still good. And I know I put Miss Rubio's dad on notice. You're going to have an expressway coming past here. And he goes, yeah, he was fine with that. So that's what will happen, and that's fine. Because at one point they wanted to put it right here on Connect Street on a big ramp going up. And we changed it and got them to push it over to Main Street, which made more sense. Instead of going here with a big overpass over the highway. Because You wouldn't be able to see out those second floor windows when they were done with it. That just didn't make any sense. So, I wish you good luck with this because this can be a tough process to go through. Be mindful of it, be mindful of the fact that there has been an awful lot of improvements made in the city with landscaping and getting things looking more aesthetic around here and more valuable. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council and commissioners at this time?
Thank you, Mayor Ledford.
Please state your first, last name, and you got 3 minutes. And Simon Brown has joined us at 6:05.
Thank you. I would like 15 seconds before my 3 minutes so that I'm on record accurately. I'm here to testify that the Planning Commission, Planning Department, and planning statutes need to be revised. I'm not here testifying against revisions because they're kind of hypothetical right now. We don't know exactly what's going on. So in past meetings it said I was here testifying against changes. I'm not testifying against changes. I'm testifying that the current environment is not working. Thank you.
Please state your name, John.
My name is John Klapperich. For the past 40 years, I have made a career on enhancing small to medium-sized businesses in the Mat-Su Borough, particularly in Wasilla and most recently in downtown Wasilla. And I'm here representing those businesses that create family wage jobs. Now, don't get me wrong, I was the past 6-year chairman of the Mat-Su Borough Planning Commission. I understand planning has its use, but what's going on in the city of Wasilla is so anti-business, and let me tell you why. Boy, this could be a weekend retreat, and I'm going to do it in 180 seconds. I only got 120 left. The moral of the story is what's going on in the downtown area is so anti-business. Like President Reagan said from the White House, in America, nothing happens till a sale is made. I've looked at more business plans than anyone in this room. I know how small the margins are. One overzealous person enforcing a statute, a deal, cuts the profit out. Take, for instance, just across the nearby. Small, 5,000-foot expansion. Let's hire 12 more people. And let's give the city, we buy the property, we do this, we do that, we do everything, and then we go to the Planning Commission and say, yep, you need 20 parking spaces, okay? We hire an engineer and we do the 20 parking spaces, but with the 4 landscape islands, you only got 18. Goodbye, weakest link. Out of the office, she said. That's the attitude. Not too far across the street, a lady that said I was the monkey that was saying yes, 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 yes. And then we said we wanted tile, we wanted this windows, we wanted this parking, we had to do this, we had to do the landscape engineering. Went to the banker, kept saying more money, more money. Now she's leaving. She said I knew I should have went on the other side of Sword Meridian. It's ridiculous for small to medium-sized business to jump through these hoops. So I close with, I highly encourage you to look at the second sentence of page 2 of your handout tonight where it says, let's encourage small business. Let's bring people to downtown Wasilla. It is completely the opposite. Try to do business with yourself is what I say. And we are in a winter, I'm going to need 10 seconds. We are in a winter community. We have snow. 88% of the people that live here want a 4-wheel drive and 50% of those people want a truck. There's no orange trees out here. We are not a walk-to-work community. And you're trying to incorporate a walk-to-work community in Wasilla, Alaska.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else that would like to come up? Please state your first and last name, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Ginger Bear. I'm Executive Director of a nonprofit here in Wasilla named called Family Promise Matsu. And in October of 2021, we were gifted a building from Pioneer Christian Fellowship to further some of the programs that we wanted to provide to the displaced homeless families that we consider our guests. Since we've gotten that building, we've been trying to get our land use permit, and the building was built in the late 80s, 1980s. The east and west side of a already paved parking area was untouched natural vegetation. So there's established trees that are 20 to 30 years old. And the building itself is surrounded by natural vegetation and some already planted, established flowering plants like, gosh, I don't know all my flowers and plants, but there's a fern that's like this big, and that doesn't grow in 10 years. I mean, this is like a 20-year establishment. My point being that the landscape is already established, and one of the requirements that we're facing is hiring somebody to come do a landscape, what do you call that, picture, so that, to tell you where we're going to put new landscape, and we don't know where to put anymore. And we're not sure that we need to or should or have to, and if we do, we don't know why, because it's already established as a very pretty nice nice business place, and it's welcoming to the community. Mayor, you've been there for the ribbon cutting for our establishment of Hope House, and we get a lot of patrons in there. We're tutoring people, helping them with their education. We are offering food and shelter in our other place for the shelter, showers and laundry for the homeless. And Families in Transition is now talking to their administration to see if they can come in and join us in our endeavors to help improve the community. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council or the commission at this time? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, please read the titles of tonight's discussion items.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have an overview of the 2011 Comprehensive Plan, the District Use Chart, Wasilla Municipal Code 1620-020A, and then other provisions of Title 16, our Land Development Code.
Okay. Is there a motion to enter a committee of the whole?
Madam Mayor, I move we enter into a commission of the whole, or committee of the whole, for discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding items 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 of the agenda as published.
Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Vlock to enter a committee of the whole. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, we are now in committee of the whole. Attorney Wells, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so before I get started, I just want to, as we move through this presentation today, I also have my colleague Zoe Eisberg.
Sorry, could you speak a little closer to the microphone?
Oh, sorry, is that better?
Thank you, yes.
Too close?
No, not at all.
Okay, all right.
There you go.
So Zoe Eisberg is my colleague and has been working with me on all things Title 16, as well as other land use projects that have been coming up. Many of you know Jessica Spooler, who also assists with those items. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that she's here and know that she is a resource for the city. All right, so as we delve in today, this is a little bit unusual for the city of Wasilla, the nature of this meeting, both being a joint special meeting, but also the topic, which is a little more nebulous than the action items that are usually before you. The administration and the bodies here, I think, all sort of collectively recognized that Title 16 maybe is not fulfilling the needs of the city or members of the community or the commercial entities in the way and as efficiently as the city had hoped. And maybe that's not true, maybe it is, but this discussion needs to happen so that we can identify where there is a breakdown, if there is a breakdown. And so in discussing this in Title 16, before we get to a place where the proposed ordinance comes with the revisions that both the Planning Commission and the City Council have considered or are thinking about, we have to know collectively what the overarching objective is. We have to understand collectively what the goals of the city of Wasilla are. There are ways we learn that, there are ways we communicate that, including a comprehensive plan, but there's also just this basic sort of give and take discussion format that we're hoping to engage in today and walk through some very sort of fundamental starting preliminary discussion items so that at the end of the day, your Title 16 reflects who the city of Wasilla is, both as a community and the goals and objectives of council and the administration and the commission. So it's all embedded in a document that's simple, clean, transparent, and easily executed. So that's sort of my overview today. And now I'm going to move through these objectives. So one of the things that we always have to do when we're starting any discussion on land use, any discussion on the use of or enforcement of zoning in a community, we need to talk about the comprehensive plan, which the city, I know, is discussing a sort of looming deadline to jump into that, and your deputy administrator can talk to you about goals that the city's goals for addressing that in short order. But right now, what we want to do is make sure that we're not violating the comprehensive plan with any direction that the council and the commission in this joint meeting or otherwise any direction we choose to go. We need to stay aligned with our comp plan as a matter of statutory law. So that's important to keep in mind. So under the Wasilla Comprehensive Plan as currently drafted, the focus and objectives of the city are to provide balanced land use patterns that support the community's future growth, to encourage development opportunities that support the city's role as a regional commercial center, to encourage a variety of residential housing opportunities, to promote positive neighborhood identities and build a strong civic base to enhance residents' quality of life, and to continue to expand the city's borders as needed to allow economic development and growth in the future. In the comprehensive plan itself, if you've had an opportunity to go through it, there are a couple really very helpful pages. One is the comprehensive plan goals broken out into economic vitality element, community assets element, transportation, land use, and notably downtown. So one of the things that you'll find in your comprehensive plan is this very clear emphasis on the downtown overlay district, or the creation of a downtown that is walkable, that is, well, I'll just read you. The downtown element is, the goals are to promote and encourage development and redevelopment within the downtown area and build the partnership and develop the community capacity required to transform downtown. Later in the comp plan, there's lots of objectives that go to the aesthetic nature or goals of the downtown area, which I think one of the things that we see in your code is those goals and objectives regarding the beautification of downtown, potentially bleeding into other areas and other districts in your code that may or may not result in greater regulation than maybe anticipated or intended by the city. Now, that doesn't make your code unlawful. It doesn't make those provisions any less valid. It doesn't mean people do not have to comply with them. They absolutely should be complying with them. But it does mean that this is a good time for the commission and the council to think about, does our code do what our comp plan intended and what our general objectives are? So perhaps the easiest way to talk about the code is to just start with the uses and talk about what you as commission and council members want to see or think you should see for uses in the various zoning districts. So I'm going to very quickly give you an overview of how your process works on what you require when people are developing property so that we know what these initials mean as we move through your district use chart. Okay, so the way that Wasilla currently governs or regulates land use is through a multi-tiered process. And some uses require an administrative approval. With an administrative approval, the city planner would apply criteria that includes the conditional use permit criteria, and the city planner would apply it with discretion unless the city planner determined that it should be elevated and considered by the planning commission. In that case, something identified as an administrative approval could actually be considered by the planning commission, and since the criteria is the same as a conditional use, it is in essence transformed into a conditional use permit process. Next, we have a use permit process. A use permit process is an administrative approval process plus. It's an administrative approval process with public notification requirements for adjacent landowners. So it's in essence everything an administrative approval is, plus that additional notice provision. Again, an individual or the city planner could elevate that process into a conditional use permit process. Then it would go before the planning commission. Next, you have your conditional use permit process. That goes before the planning commission. They weigh the specific criteria contained in your code. The criteria you use for your conditional use permit process is very, very similar to what we see in communities across the state, which is from a lawyer's perspective, a great thing. That means the case precedent and all of the information we get over the years regarding these criteria and how they are applied and what is lawful and what is not all applies here. And so we like that because it gives us transparency and we understand. That doesn't mean that you have to stick with that criteria in that order, but it has a familiarity and a comfort from a legal perspective. The next thing that you might do with use is completely exclude it from a district. Now, if you completely exclude a use from a district, then the only way a use happens in that district is to be a variance. A variance is not like a permit. A variance is something is so different for this piece of property that we're going to let it violate the law. We don't have a permit process for it. We are deciding that this use or this property is so different, we're not going to apply our laws to it. When a variance comes into play, we go to court and we look at what they say, and they are very express about when a municipality can grant a variance because because of the nature of it, it's suspect. It's suspect from the beginning in the eyes of the court because you're allowing one person to break the law and not another, right? So that's why we have very specific criteria. That criteria should be the criteria expressed in court cases. We do have some updates to make to the code to make sure that we are aligning ourselves with the relevant law. But finally, so we have our permitting process, we have a variance process. Another thing that we might find is grandfathering. When do we grandfather a property in or a use in? Right, so this is the other kind of thing. So these are the building blocks of a land use title. And that is, I know I'm going to talk at you a lot. I'm trying to throw these out there, but as we talk about this language will become more familiar. And then I'm hoping that the commission and the council will get a really good feel for where we have some tension and some problems, arguably problems, and how Title 16 applies. So, all of that said, I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to look at the district use chart. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna march through some uses and I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So one of the things that we have, when we have an administrative approval process and a use permit process, both of which can be converted into a conditional use permit process upon discretion of the city planner and only have a notification difference, one of the things we want to think about, so this is just, I'm just throwing that out there, is do we have too many layers? You know, if you own a business, or anybody owns a business or is a landowner or is using property in Wasilla, is there a goal to ensure that they understand with certainty what they can and cannot do on that property? So that's going to be one of the questions that we will be discussing. And secondly, is there a goal to ensure that if there is a use that requires conditions, that there is a difference between that and a use that simply requires compliance? So there is so in that discussion regarding the difference between an administrative approval, where a city planner may go through a checklist, for example, to ensure that licenses have been obtained and that certain setbacks are there, or whatever the list might contain, is very different than the city planner going through a discretionary consideration of criteria that then the planning commission is also going through on the conditional use permit. So we're gonna talk about how those work together, and so just keep those concepts in mind. So let's start with the district use chart. Let's start with accessory uses. So in order to have an accessory use anywhere within the city of Wasilla, any zoning district, except for industrial, administrative approval is required. That means under no condition is an accessory use simply permitted in any district. Industrial district requires a use permit. So that means an accessory use in industrial requires a permit with notice to the adjacent property owners. An adult business is excluded in every district.
Madam Attorney, can you tell me where in the code this table is? Not in the handout, but where in the code this table is?
1620-020.
There is no table in 1620-02. Can you tell me what page the table is on?
I don't know the page number, but I can pull it up. Let me. I think I might have the code up in my computer.
Mr. Stafford?
Yeah, I showed on 16-36.2.
36.2, thank you.
16-36.2. Oh, in the.
This is my copy of Title 16.
Yeah, I think it's. Am I?
On page 173, district use chart.
Here.
I think they're looking for the code provision, which I really thought was 1620-020.
That is the correct number.
Okay.
As far as page numbers, although it is on 16-36.3 in the copy of the code.
Yeah, that's the code provision is 1620-020.
So my point here was 1620-020 includes a use chart describing the type of permit needed. I looked through 1620-020, get all the way through there, don't see it. The next thing is 1616. So shouldn't there be a reference here if we're trying to make it where people can immediately go and see what this chart is? Shouldn't we say, you know, as reflected on page whatever, or include the table in 1620-020?
I think we should make it as easily accessible, yes, as possible. So that's something when we're redoing it, and to the extent that when you're looking at the hard copy, because one of the things I think
Or even the
too.
electronic copy.
So, yeah, so it comes up for me. I don't know why. When I go in electronically, I pull up but that doesn't mean, and I can't recall if I'm hitting the link that's in 1620-02. I can't remember how I'm getting there, but it's absolutely important here, especially when visualization becomes we're talking land use, pictures actually matter, they show up in the codes, they, procedures and best practice policies come into play, so that's a really good point, because we have to make sure that it's user-friendly.
Thank you.
So the next one is adult businesses, which are excluded everywhere except for by a conditional use permit in the commercial district. So I'm not going to read every single district chart use, but I am going to pick a few, and I am going to ask, and hopefully the city clerk can assist us in doing this in a appropriate way. I know we're in the committee of the whole, but so one of the things that we have is animal shelters, and we have animal shelters excluded in rural, single family, rural residential, 2. So RR, R1, and R2, it's excluded in all of those places, and residential multifamily. But it is allowed by a conditional use permit in commercial and a use permit in industrial and public. So one of my questions would be, I guess one of the things I would like to hear from the commission and the council is a discussion about whether it's a specific one, looking at animal shelters and going through the rationale between the exemption or the prohibition against them everywhere, the use of conditional use permit in commercial, and the use of use permits in industrial public. I just want to get a feel for how these uses are striking you as members on a personal level. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it helps us think about the different instruments we're using in regard to use. Yes, Councilor.
Madam Mayor? Counselor?
Mr. Johnson.
If we could just look, I'm a little bit confused in one aspect in the chart. You have right under excluded is blank, no city approval necessary. Would you go through duplex in the second column and explain to me why under R2 that wouldn't be blank rather than an administrative approval?
No, that's an excellent question. So what we're seeing here is when you look at the uses in the city, you don't see very many blanks, right? There's not a lot of things permitted. I don't think there's any, if I remember correctly. There might be. And so then, so there's not a lot. All of these uses, now granted, all of these uses are considered somewhat different than what I would consider the sort of standard use of a parcel, right? So in the residential, in R1, single-family residential, the standard use would be single-family home. And here, all of these things are separate and apart from that, obviously. So that it does make sense that the only thing they're putting in the use chart are uses that would have some implications. But the idea that all of these uses do not have a single district in which they are permitted outright is a decision. That's a deliberate decision that has real consequences and maybe real benefits. And that's not for me to decide, certainly as an attorney, but it is something that the goal of this meeting and the Title 16 revisions that council and the commission and the administration are contemplating is to be deliberate for any changes made. So if that makes sense. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you, so I hope.
So my point is that shouldn't you have a blank in any particular block in this particular chart when the use or the district or whatever it is, the activity, is actually meeting the definition of what that block is? For instance, residential 2 is a duplex, so why wouldn't that be blank? It seems to me once you start to have that, so now I have to have an approval for doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing in this district. Is that my understanding of blank? Or am I wrong?
Blank would be very, blank is permitted outright.
Yes.
And that's what, and so there are things that are not included in here that are permitted outright. But if it's on this list, it is not outright permitted or permitted outright in any one of these areas. So you can have, for example, heavy equipment. There is no district even commercial and industrial, where you're outright permitted to have heavy equipment. Now, maybe that's okay, right? Maybe that's okay, but it's excluded in R1, R2, and multifamily, and it's allowed by administrative approval in rural, industrial, in industrial and public and rural, but it requires a use permit in commercial. Remember, a use permit requires more notice than an administrative approval. So questions like, why is heavy equipment, why do we require greater permitting requirements in commercial for heavy equipment than we do in industrial? There may be very good reasons for that. That may have been thought out before, but for me, I want these bodies to think about these questions when Title 16 comes before you, you're really thinking about what do we want to do and where do we want to do it, right? And does this reflect what our comprehensive plan tells us that our goals and objectives are? Do we understand this? And does the public understand how these come into play? So you can go through here on your free time. Labor Day's weekend's coming up, so it's a fun little pastime, and think through where do we allow daycares and to what extent? And does that reflect an objective and a deliberate decision? So, in essence, the goal, it's my understanding that the goal is to revise Title 16 as necessary to ensure that it becomes a citizen-friendly document or a user-friendly document, so that when an individual is developing property, owning property, changing or enhancing it, they know what they have to do, they know when they have to do it, they are very clear on what they have to fill out, and there are differences. So if a person obtains a parcel or lives on a parcel and they're contemplating a use on that parcel that requires a conditional use permit, then that individual understands what happens when a conditional use permit is required. But if an individual is on property that requires an administrative approval, they may not contemplate that what will ultimately be necessary is a conditional use permit, right? But we have these elevation provisions, we have notice and criteria provisions that all mirror our conditional use permit process. So one of the things that we will be asking the commission and the council to consider is, can we break down our layers? Is it appropriate to have outright permission, just permit things outright, exclude things outright, have an administrative approval process that does not have the same level of discretion, that really is a checklist, that you have things in the code that you would like to see in various districts regarding various uses, and then finally you have a conditional use permit? Or does the city have a desire, do we want to maintain these multi-levels of permitting and consideration? So that's one of the big questions that will be thrown at both bodies as you consider the revisions. So really, at the end of the day, we're going to want to ask a few questions today that we are hoping to get answers to. And we're going to keep them really simple and really sort of big picture, because they'll provide the administration what we need to bring a draft Title 16 back to the bodies, and that way we can work from that draft. But if we have the wrong answers, or we're not going in the right direction regarding objective and priority, then we may bring you a document that needs a lot more work. So the goal here is to be efficient. So today we are asking you to discuss regulation and the very, very large concept of more, less, or just enough, or more or less, say in downtown versus rural residential. I would like ideally for you to have a discussion regarding your zoning districts. And even if it's just a few comments here or there, and then ultimately some direction, collective direction, what we want to hear is, when you think about the city of Wasilla, are there areas that you want to see, for example, the downtown overlay district, a certain level of regulation in areas where you want to see less? Or do you want to see certain districts regulated more rigidly or significantly than others? Or do you have a general feel of, we want to keep regulation to a minimum? We just really want to hear your thoughts. And we realize that the comprehensive plan is the way that you express those collectively. We have the plan, we will make sure that a draft complies with it, but as individuals, and the individuals adopting the revisions ultimately on Title 16, we're hoping for that question to be answered. Or those questions to be answered. And finally, just any thoughts you have regarding the approach and the need and the emphasis when revisiting Title 16. Title 16 is a very important code and title for the city of Wasilla. There are a lot of resources invested in both land use regulation, enforcement, the landscaping plan. There's a lot of volunteer hours by numerous individuals, and the administration is working hard to make sure all of that input is respected and valued in a way that if not in Title 16, it's included in best practice manuals, that you create a approach that is simple, clean, transparent, direct, easy to understand, and has other pieces that lead to growth, and that's a policy-based area, which will be discussed with you later. But right now, this is sort of the basis of this presentation, is really just to ask these very large questions. And we do have one other sort of hypothetical we would like to walk you all through, but I would like to do that after we have a discussion of sort of these larger looming questions, if that would work, Mayor. Yeah? Okay.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, thank you, Attorney Holly. But I think another question that was not on the list here, and that is, before you decide that a regulation is too many and want less, or too less and want more, a thorough analysis of any process, you have to go back and look at history. How did we get here? Did someone just sit down one day and make up these regs, and that's how we got here? Were those regs made from circumstances and situations that occurred that provoked them to be made and stuff? And I'm not saying whether they're good or bad, but do a history, find out how you got to where you are. You can't decide where you're going if you don't know where you come from. If you start in the middle of a journey, where are you going? And the second thing is, if you go to the electronic copy of 16, that chart is right there in the middle of the paragraph.
No, I think that's really helpful, and I think one of the things too, as we move forward, when we bring an ordinance, when we to the commission and the council, we will include the legislative history of the pertinent section, especially if we're making a significant change. I think that would be really helpful, because here we often see sections that are reactive in a good way and reactive in a bad way, and we also see things that reflect. I mean, one of the things, for example, you can see a focus on a particular district and accomplishing things in that district where the regulations will fit like a glove and will be perfect, and then sometimes you'll see, and I'm not saying this happened in Wasilla, but you'll see that bleed into other land regulations where it wasn't intended, or we at least don't see that intention. And so by understanding history, we can sort of shift without changing the regulations where they're working and changing them where they're not.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not sure if this would go to the clerk or our deputy administrator. If I remember correctly, the commission had a meeting involving changing our approval process, and we were trying to remove the use permit as a whole. believe the commission approved that, and then did it make it to the council yet, or did I miss something, or has it just not made it there and we were trying to review this prior to seeing that come forward to the council?
And I can answer that question, because that was, when we realized that we had some of these larger looming issues, the first step was to talk with the commission and the council about changing and revising the permitting process and streamlining it and making it so that there is not 2 layers of use permit procedures. Again, not that anything is unlawful about that, it's certainly lawful and appropriate, it's just, it creates unnecessary confusion. Yeah, so lawful but unnecessary confusion, which is not the goal of, so that's that discussion. So we had that discussion. After that discussion, we came to council, had a very similar discussion with council, and ultimately, this joint meeting is the byproduct of the intentions expressed by the commission and the council to delve into Title 16 and clean it up.
Follow-up question, Madam Mayor. So are we going to review that again, or is that onto the council at this point now and it's out of the commission's hands?
I'm not sure. So one of the things, this is an unusual revision. Title 16 will always come back to the commission for its approval, but it may start with council, our original draft, because we have this joint meeting. The way I envisioned it, although this may be a discussion point item for everyone as well, is that we would draft give it our best effort to draft Title 16 with the administration, and take what we hear today and make sure that we incorporate those into the package that we present to council. Council will then look that over and then they will consider it. I'm sure there will be changes. It will look very similar to our code of ethics process, which means it generally is not introduction and adoption. There's more than one. Sometimes there's more than one public hearing, but there's certainly more than one discussion. And we kind of work through the language together. At that point, once they have it in its final form, I'm not sure. I think that council would either adopt it and then defer it back to the commission, or refer it back and then bring it back up for final adoption. So the last public hearing is after. And so I'll confer with city clerk and we can figure out the best process. But this will be different than what we've done before, but we'll make sure both bodies need to be actively engaged in the final product.
Thank you. It's just an interesting one because, again, we started the conversation, we're passing it up to the commission or the council, and then now we're talking about it again. So thank you.
Yes, we're trying to make sure that it is a well-informed discussion. Hence the use of a joint meeting, which I believe is a very unusual thing for Wasilla. Yes, so we were delving into new territory. No pun intended. Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any comments that they want to say? I mean, one thing I know that I'm sort of asking a lot of each commission and council member to basically declare what their thoughts are on regulation, and that may seem difficult. So I guess one of the things that I would say is, from everything that I have heard from a review of the comp plan, my understanding is that Wasilla wants deliberate and pointed regulation, but not over-regulation. That they want to keep it pretty minimal, but make sure that it has the regulations necessary to reach its goals and objectives. I interpret that to be on the scale of more, less, middle, of a lower regulation threshold with pointed increases in regulation in various districts. So I would like each commission and council member to talk to that, to my interpretation, because that is the lens that we will be, and I think that's the administration's interpretation as well, lower regulation, unless it's very sort of deliberate and pointed. So to the extent we are wrong on that as we move forward in providing a draft, I want to know that going into it because it will influence what we propose. So if we could just start, Mayor, can we just move around the diocese and and
Sure.
see sort of what each of your responses is to that understanding.
Ian, we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of the feedback we've gotten is again, it always comes down to less regulation. People want to be able to do what they want. Though again, we still want some guardrails on what it is. What Councilman Johnson mentioned was like, why isn't it blank? And I was thinking about it, same with single family. I mean, if you've driven around this valley at all, you see a lot of people that will throw up a house and not cite it because they're trying to get lower tax value assessment. So, I mean, again, I don't want to continuously tell people what they have to do or make them come to the city to get things done. Though at the same time, that's what we want to avoid happening. We want our city to be beautiful, and we just want to say, hey, tell us what you're doing. Chances are we're going to say yes, but we just want to make sure you're not throwing up a shack and don't plan on finishing it when it comes to essentially getting an administrative approval, is my understanding when it comes to those types of things. Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate Councilman Brown's comments too on, how did we get here? There's some in here that there's probably a reason why this was either under a specific type of use, and so I think a lot of this, we're almost going to need to go, maybe take 4 or 5 of them a meeting and look at them and say, hey, let's go line by line and change these, add things to them or remove them. But I think overall what we want to see is, of course, like you mentioned, less regulation, but with guardrails that are pretty obvious in place.
Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. From everything that I've read in the comprehensive plan and in Title 16, I know there's been so much work that has gone into this over the years, definitely. And I can see some of the processes with zones that are next to each other, why some of these are conditional use instead of administrative. I mean, I understand the process, a part of it. I think Councilmember Brown is absolutely correct about us needing to know the history, whether some of these issues have been put in place, some of these code regulations and things, whether it was reactive from past issues that have happened, or if it was a wish list. And I think what most people want is something that is easy to understand. I think it's very easy to get lost in details. Sometimes we can overcomplicate things, trying to make sure all the details are there. I think everybody wants the whole feeling of the city is that the city of Wasilla is open for business. That we don't want to complicate people's lives, but in the process of that, we also want to have some guidelines. Otherwise, you end up with an ugly mess that I have seen in some areas in the state. So I think this is going to be not a short process that we go through. But hopefully through this, hopefully we can simplify it a little bit more so that the general public can understand it easier and not feel like it's just way over their heads and they don't understand, and all of a sudden they feel like they have all these layers that they just want to throw up their hands, because that's not what I'm sure any of this intent is. I'm sure that's not what anybody wants. Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, Commissioner Seals. I'm very mindful of what Simon Brown said about the history. I've watched Wasilla since 1974, when the first time I drove through. There's been a lot of challenges put in Wasilla's future by the past. So as long as we can keep this to a simplified, where the public understands in a short period of time what they need to do, what they need to follow,
I think that is probably going to be in Wasilla's future best interest. All the people I've talked to over the years, they want this place to be friendly to business, and it hasn't been always friendly to business, although business comes to the city because of its offerings. But I know a lot of time has been spent just in the Planning Commission since I've been here and in years past. I think the history, so that we can look at it and see where it's been formed and make changes so that it's simple, easy to understand for every citizen that wants to do something in the city. I think it's in the city's best interest in the future.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Speaking to Ian's point, I mean, I believe that we need to have a process which is as simple as possible and yet continue, for instance, if a person is going to put up a residential house, he needs a building permit. But on the other hand, if you're putting up a residential house in a residential zoned single-family house, why do I have to take and get a administrative approval for putting up that house? That makes no sense. We've added additional regulations on top of regulation. We already have the building permit. The building permit should be clear. It should say you're going to complete the house. The house is going to have siding, it's going to have a roof, and it's going to, the basic things that a code-built house would have. That's part of a building permit. But it needs to be clear as to when you need to take and go to these other particular actions. And you shouldn't have to take and say, well, I think it's an administrative action, and then only to find out, I need a conditional use permit because the person that I'm talking to didn't feel that I had the right answers to the questions. You should have the criteria laid out well enough in advance that you would know what it is that you need to do, rather than just relying on some administrative person. Example, I always talk of in examples. When I'm modifying an aircraft, I know what the rules are. Okay? If I know what the rules are and I'm staying within the rules, I don't have to go back to the FAA for further approval for my change that I'm making to the aircraft, because I'm within the rules. On the other hand, when I know where I am, I then know what I have to do to go back to the FAA to make my approvals. It's all laid out there in the regulations if anybody wants to read them. We need to be able to make it simple so that the average person will know what our process is, or a proposed business person coming in will know what it is. And as far as history goes, clearly we have a mess. History got us to this mess, okay? And sometimes you can go back and you can hand wring over as to how we did it or what it was that we did, but we still have the mess that we've got. And we need to clean up the mess and not get too hung up on how we got here. Yes, there is some areas where we need to think about how we did it. But it's a mess. Let's fix it.
Nikki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I understand is we made some changes in 2015, maybe under Mr. Rupright, I believe. And I guess that's what maybe we need to look at. Why did we make those changes? So we made those changes. I was on the Planning Commission not very long, but it was after that. And we definitely had businesses coming in for complaining. I mean, and I didn't really enjoy the Planning Commission because it didn't make any sense to me. We'd have people coming in for a variance, and it sounded very, logical to me, but then we would be told or whatever that no, that's, our recommendation was not to approve one. Like one guy is in industrial, it said he had to have so many of these plants, and he had some white rock, and it looked beautiful. It was in industrial, whatever. And he wanted to have a variance that he could have his white rock there. And it was recommended to us on the Planning Commission that no, you can't have that. And we did, and a lot of businesses were coming in, and that was the situation. Then we'd have some that were in the overlay area, totally different than what was in there. And we'd be recommended, give that variance. Yeah, they're supposed to have these type of windows and stuff. We don't care. It made no sense to me, and I come home going, I don't know what we're doing, but I know, I was told that maybe the one in 2015 was about 20 pages. So it was redone, and then it was 40 pages. And we've had a lot of complaints, so we hired or not hired, but created that, even the landscaping committee, and now I hear it's 60 pages. And it was to make it more simple, but now we have 60 pages. And so I believe too that the downtown overlay, it needs to be pretty. Mr. Klapperich was talking about, we're not a walking community, whatever. We want that area to be a walking community. We want it pretty. We want people to stop. People go to Palmer just to walk the little shops and to go to Friday Fling here and do this and that. And I would love a little downtown area for Wasilla to do that. And so I don't want to destroy that. We want that to be pretty. We want it walking safe. We want sidewalks. We want that stuff in our town. We've been told forever, and it's true, we're a city built on the strip, the highway. And that's no fun, we all go to Palmer to do these fun little things. So I think it's real important for us to beautify our little downtown area, have people be able to walk. And we'd have people come to the council meetings in the winter that would complain that maybe we didn't clear snow for people to walk. They do walk. There are people who walk to work. There are people who walk in our community. And we need to know, we want that, and we want them to be safely do it in our pretty little town. So I think, we do need regulations, but we don't need it complicated and overbearing to where we have businesses coming in and complaining constantly on, I think, silly things. We need to have some common sense, and I'm hoping we can get maybe a 60-pager down to 20. Why not? So, anyway.
Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Attorney, for your discussion there. But overall, I think the public isn't concerned about over-regulation or under-regulation. They're concerned about appropriate regulation. And in many instances, some of what we do is inappropriate regulation because, as Ms. Velak pointed out, we grant variances all the time. Not sometimes, but we grant variances on a fairly routine basis. And then we turn down new businesses coming into town for things. I remember the gravel discussion. That was, we turn down businesses, we lose business because we decide to enforce it for one person where we haven't enforced it for another. So the appropriateness of the regulation, I think, is what most people are concerned about. Obviously, nobody wants regulations that affect them. They want them to apply to the other guy, but not to them, and that's just human nature. But having a regulation that's appropriate and properly enforced across the board, I think, is what the public usually looks for. When former Mayor Rupright testified a few minutes ago, or talked during public comment, he talked about charrettes. And we used to do charrettes all the time here in the city, in this room. We would get people together. We had tables set up, we had staff here, we had council here, we had members of the planning commission here, and people could come in and talk about the plan that we were looking at and put in notes, actually write them down instead of just talking to somebody or sending an email to somebody that's not seen by everybody else. But those were very effective ways of judging what the public wanted. And I've asked for some charrettes on things, and those haven't happened, mainly because, it's a lot of work to put one of those together, but we work for the public and we work because of the public, and so we should be able to do that. And for Mr. Brown's comment about history, yeah, we do have to go back and look at the history where there is a history, but we also have to remember that the majority of changes that are made because of a vocal minority that are changed. 4 people come to the planning commission, or 3 people come to the city council and talk about a certain thing and sway the vote. Make us decide that one thing is right and another thing is wrong, and then we hear after the fact, from 20 or 30 or 40 people, that what the heck did you do that for? So looking at the history is important. Why did we do it? But in many cases, that history just isn't there. We don't have a historian, so to speak. We have a city council, and we have a clerk that keeps minutes of things, but pretty much it just says, Stu talked in favor of this, and Holly talked in opposition of this, or that's pretty much all it says. It doesn't really delve into the history. So we have to remember that a lot of decisions that are made are based on the decisions of a vocal minority, and not just that, but a lot of those decisions are made in error. And a lot of decisions that ignore that vocal minority are made in error as well. So there are lots of mistakes out there. Lots of things we've done well, lots of things we've done improperly. We don't need to be afraid to fix mistakes because, 4 out of 6 members of the council voted for something. That doesn't mean that it's appropriate today. So my biggest takeaway here is that we need to look for what's appropriate, be at the level of regulation, and is the regulation itself something that's appropriate for a town of our size. Thank you.
Ms. Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'm impressed that we all can agree that we need less. That's huge. Title 16. I want my 12-year-old to be able to read this, understand it, and open a brand new business, do a duplex, whatever this may be. We talked about it. Everybody has the layers on top of layers. As a business owner myself, the hoops, they're endless right now. And looking back I have 2 different businesses at this point. Looking back at the old code, history is awesome, you guys. Take a look around. If we just want to talk about the landscaping part of it, the code back in the day is more rocks, more beautiful shrubs and trees that actually grow in Alaska and look good year round. They're covered with snow. All this new chips and little tiny shrubberies around a tree, let's put 100 of them, and no upkeep on them. We all know that we're only green for how long? It's a huge thing for a business owner to go, hey, I've got to spend a certain percentage on opening my new business, but the landscaping is going to kill me. And like I said, speak wholeheartedly on that definitely needs to change. I'm not saying let's just let everybody build everything that they want, but I'm saying I think with the group that we have here, we could probably come up with a pretty good plan. And like I said, I think it really ultimately starts that a 12-year-old can read it and understand it. And yeah, I could talk all day about it, but I think leave some for us guys that are at the end here. So I won't take any, I have more, but I won't take any more. No, you're good. You're good. I could talk all day, but honestly, I think that everybody has done their homework in the sense of being in the community and hearing the things that the community is talking about. I think it's huge. And we definitely need to fix it, for sure. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Thank
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Couple of things. One, history is not to just go back and look and continue doing something. History is a very specific aspect of analysis. You go back and look at history, you see why it was did, and then you analyze that to see if it makes sense or whether it's appropriate for the time now. That's what history is about. It's not just to go back and look and say, keep doing it. And we talk about who wants what and stuff. Are we here today because a majority of Wasilla want this, or because of a small minority complain that's not something not being done? And I believe I was elected to the city council to represent all of Wasilla. I think you was appointed to the commission to represent all of Wasilla, not any specific part of the city, but the entire city. And we talk about who wants what. The comprehensive plan was not done by a Wasilla employee. The comprehensive plan was done by an outside agency who went to businesses and who went to citizens and got input. And that's where a lot of the stuff you see in front of you today, the Title 16 and the charts and stuff, was a result of that comprehensive plan where citizens of Wasilla said, this is what we want. I'm not saying it's the right one for now, but that's how we got to where we are. It was a very in-depth, lengthy process where they went around, talked to communities, talked to business owners, talked to builders, came up with a plan. And be careful going less, because as you go less, and I hate to talk about any one city, but visit Juneau, Alaska. A prime example of a city that did things without a comprehensive plan, without future thinking about what this is going to look like 20 years from now. And once you put a big box store or a house or whatever, you just can't come in tomorrow and pick it up and move it 5 feet. It's there. And to go around and try to come back and undo something later on is a very difficult process. And you're always going to have somebody who's going to come before the council or the commission and say, why can't I have this? Are they doing it because it is the best thing for all of Wasilla? Are they because of what is good for Simon and my pocketbook and my budget right now? And once I build and get my money, I'm gone, and I don't care how it looks later. I'm not saying that's happening, but that's what we got to consider. That's part of that historical analysis, that mission analysis, is to go and look. And the biggest part I would like to leave with us here today is when all of us is out of office, either by kicked out or by resigning or the time is up, when we are gone in 20 years from now, will the people sitting here be able to look back and said what they did in August of 23 made it easier for us to continue doing what we're doing today? That's part of that analysis. What are we going to look at as a future? What do we want to look at as a future? Do we want to have traffic jams and people not being able to park and move and walk and do the things that is very difficult to do in Juneau, Alaska right now? I use that city, but there's other cities in Alaska and the lower 48 that I've visited. A lack of planning and a lack of in-depth planning and a lack of in-depth regulations. I'm a retired state trooper. There's a speeding law. There's 1,000 pieces go to that speeding law. And when you shortcut it and just say don't speed, you don't cover all the aspects of it. So let's do some serious analysis here and not think about 2023, but think about 2033 as you make your decisions here today. Thank you.
Mr. Stafford.
So my sentiment would be, of course, we cannot be the Wild West where anything goes, but on the other hand, we can't kill business and residents by death with 1,000 cuts of rules. I agree with Councilmember Rubio that it should be something that can be explained to someone 12 or 13, that they should be able to walk away, a businessman that walks in, a builder that walks in, a resident that walks in, should be able to walk away with an understanding of what the rules are. They should be consistent throughout the entire code. There shouldn't be anything contradictory there. And I appreciate the work that previous administrations and councils and commissions and committees have put into what we have now. But I think it's a document that can be improved upon. And I think there can be some simplification to make it easier, but also protect the citizens and the residents of Wasilla.
Holly?
Thank you. So I think I got a lot out of that. But I did. We are going
Careful
to.
what you ask for.
We are going to make sure that this is written for someone who is 12 years old, on a reading level of 12 years old. I think that's actually a pretty high reading level when you're creating a document, when the computer spits back an age for you. I think we may want to aim a little, like, just a little younger than that.
I got an 8-year-old.
Okay, so I think we're gonna aim for 8, and I, as an attorney, I expect us to hit about 32. No, just kidding, we are going to hit 12, we're gonna, 8. Okay, 8 to 12, we're gonna come in at that range. I think one of the things we can do is create a history chart that, as we're having these discussions, we can see where we've been. And I do understand that you are not saying necessarily defer to that, but if we understand it, we could decide, and when I say we, I mean you, can decide what you do with that information. One of the things that Councilmember Vlock talked about was this sort of feeling of not understanding exactly why where we're prohibiting something or allowing something. So one of the things, we will rewrite this having 2 forms of permitting for first consideration, which will be a use permit process, no notification to the public or adjacent property owners and no discretion for the planning department. It will be a list of the things that are currently required that the planner and the planning department will march through. That might be too rigid, and then that the bodies can make that decision, and we'll broaden the scope, but we'll start there. Then we'll take a conditional use permit process, which will have all of the criteria and all of the considerations that are applied to some of these uses, which in essence, currently, the way administrative approval and use permits are done, they're in essence conditional use permits anyway, right? So by starting there, where we have a non-discretionary use permit process that simply has a checklist. Do you have the right setbacks? If you're gonna build an accessory building, we expect you to do whatever we expect them to do, which will ultimately be the decision of the bodies. And if they match those, and the planner has the chance to go through and say, yep, all those are matched, stamped, approved, there's nothing beyond that use permit, just simply that sort of, those guardrails. And so I'm trying to combine everything I heard you guys say, so I'm gonna give you sort of where that puts me, and then you can step me back. And so the document is at least a strong working document once we start discussing it. So that's sort of what I was hearing. The conditional use permit process will reflect predominantly what's in your code now. That's the process of when these matters come before the commission. And so the other piece, and this is the piece that I have not qualified to do as an attorney, it will be going through these uses and deciding, is this a use permit? Or is this a conditional use permit? And then, but I can't give you tools to do it. So what I can do is look at codes and work with the administration to make sure that when we're talking about accessory uses, you know how accessory uses are regulated in communities of similar size and culture and location. And then you will all be able, hopefully, to have the tools you need to make those decisions. So from everything everybody said, that is what I was hearing. We are going to make the process shorter. To the extent we have good work done on best practices regarding landscaping, I know there has been a lot of work. We're going to create blue ribbon plans, which will be sort of best practices, not mandatory, but permissive approaches to landscaping in various districts that we use the benefit of all of those engineering and expert guidance that I think that was received. So we'll start there, and if the bodies decide to mandate some of those things and pull them back out of those sort of blue ribbon plans, we will have all the tools and we can talk about what you want to do. In the meantime, we're going to keep things very basic, based upon communities of the size of Wasilla or close to it, with similar cultures and similar resources. And then we'll sort of do an a la carte and go through these provisions. So I'd like to get sort of any comments, or Mayor, I'd just like to get everybody's feel on that approach. That is the approach I will take based on the comments I heard, with any additions that.
Okay, Mr. Stafford, your comment, please.
Can you you restate the question again? I want to make sure I'm speaking.
I just want to make sure the way that I have summarized our first attempt at the draft ordinance complies with sort of what your thoughts were and your intentions from what I heard, sort of the overarching goals and objectives of each commission and council member. I have to say, everybody seemed pretty aligned, which makes our job a lot easier. So, but if I miss something, or if there's a piece you really want to make sure we emphasize or pay attention to, this would just be an opportunity for us to gather that information.
Right, and so kind of the question is, you know, how do you eat an elephant? Where do you start the process? It's one bite at a time, but where do you start at? Is kind of what you're asking, I think, as part of that?
Yes, I mean, and are you okay with our process of eating the elephant?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to start somewhere, so we'll, yeah, start there and then see where it takes us, and we'll eventually get to where we want to be.
Okay. Chair Seals.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Wasilla doesn't have an asphalt problem. Wasilla doesn't have a green problem. Wasilla has a traffic problem. I think in the landscape regulations, the main thing should be stormwater drainage, enough parking for businesses to have parking, ease of snow removal, and what is Wasilla going to do with the snow once they pushed it to the side of the road where the sidewalk is? So I think if we go along those lines, I think we can all come together and get a functioning scope on landscaping.
Melvin, are you still with us?
Yes, I am, Matt.
Okay, you want to weigh in?
And I agree with mostly what everyone said. Regulate me override and especially for the small medium businesses, looking at the landscape regulations, that's what we've been dealing with for the last year plus. It just needs to be written and regulated in a way that's not so burdensome fiscally where somebody can spend a whole bunch of money trying to comply with the regulations.
Okay, so, so are you saying that you agree with the way Holly has laid out the process to start this?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay. And Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. I do agree with the city attorney's thoughts on where to start with this. This isn't going to be an easy process by any means, but we have to start somewhere, and I think this is a good place to start, and we can go from there. I'm in agreement with it.
Ian?
Thank you, Mayor. This was a question I was pondering all day, is where's the best place to start? What's going to be sometimes the most impactful? Like, what are our citizens going to notice the most if we were to start making changes to this? One of the questions I had overall was just, with this comprehensive development plan, I mean, we're 12 years old now on it. I think the biggest update we've seen to it, I'd say, was like more or less the landscape plan aspect of it. We just did our sets as well. What I was almost wondering as the better place to start would be if we looked at all the different goals that we had in this plan, and if you actually go into each of the different chapters, those goals are broken down even further into smaller pieces, saying, hey, these are the different areas of this chapter or this part of the city that we really wanted to focus on. What are those goals that we wanted to complete? I wonder and it's hard to quantify some of those goals. I I wonder if there was a way that we could look at some of those and say, hey, this is what we did really well. We far exceeded those goals. We didn't hit these goals, and this is where we missed, and are these goals even relevant anymore? Some of these things that we looked at 12 years ago, I mean, almost 14 years ago, because it took 2 years to create the plan. Is the city still headed in that direction where we wanted it to go that far? Because if we start looking at just this district use chart, I mean, we could sit here and break this down for, like I said, you know, maybe we start doing that at commission meetings, is we take 3 or 4 of them and we review them. I wonder if we look at these goals in the comp plan first and say, hey, this is where we won, this is where we didn't win as a city, and now we know what we missed and what we need to work on. I wonder if those are the things that we need to be focusing on, is what's missing in our comp plan.
One thing too, just to add, the comp plan process and I would turn to the deputy administrator regarding the comp plan process. There is a separate process that should be laying out those objectives. So one thing we could do is make sure that, I mean, when I look at the code, when I look at Title 16 now, I can tell that the comp plan has been incorporated and the goals and objectives are incorporated in the downtown overlay district to a certain extent, right? And then it is less apparent that the comp plan played a part both timing-wise and otherwise in things like procedures and process and permitting components and in just general land use permissions. But so for the purposes of the code writing, I can break down, I look at the comp plan and make sure that we have a history chart and we have a comp plan chart that reflects and demonstrates the things that you're flagging, if that works, because that, you know, so that'll give those 2 pieces, and then it should dovetail into, and I'm not sure, Crystal, what is the timing on the comp plan process?
So the plan that we have expired in 2021. And the state recognizes these plans as a planning tool, and they are used to not only give the forward thinking for your goals and your priorities, but they also have a funding vehicle. And what I'm seeing in planning is that the funding vehicles were never exercised, but the regulatory enforcement was. And I don't know if that's a good way to grow economic development. But the state will not recognize us and our planning capabilities or even funding planning if we don't update this plan, which is part of the reason we did the sets, is so we can go to EDA and ask them for the grant to help us update this plan. And really, and former Mayor Rupright would probably agree, that it's okay after 10 years to say our plan probably isn't going to be the right plan today. And that's why they want you to update it every 5 or 10 years. And you'll see on page 12, the timeline of when this stuff actually started, which was the initial planning initiative was in May of 2009. But the city has continued to make that investment updated. So the sets that we just completed, the comprehensive economic development strategy, was really important because it focused on the economics of where we are today. Then the comp plan is going to focus on where do we really want to have zoning and what do we want to zone in these districts that make economic sense for the residents.
So those 2 processes really need to go hand in hand. So one of the things that maybe we will do, at least for purposes of Title 16, which needs some procedural changes, and we can bring that down to, we can meet all of the goals we just said, and we can reduce the permitting to a use permit and a conditional use permit. We can preserve the other uses until the comp plan process is complete. The only thing that will leave open is deciding, okay, look, we have something on here that gets a use permit and a administrative approval. Do we want to move that up to a conditional use permit? Do we want to permit it outright, like let it just be permitted in that particular district. And those are gonna be easier to change in the future if the comp plan leads you in one direction. You know, you basically wanna decide when we have a permit that is going away, if we're gonna go up or down, or, you know, or how we're gonna reflect that in the district chart in the meantime. Does that make sense? So hopefully we can keep those changes small as to the use until the comp plan process finishes. But clean up the rest of it as to consistent enforcement, permitting, and regulations that are not layered, that are express.
And most of my comments about the comp plan is, again, it's expired. And so again, we might start seeing some direction change where we want to take the city. And so, I'm fine with where we're headed on this. I think, again, we need to be doing something about it. I just think that comp plan is a very vital piece to making sure we're doing everything how we should be doing it.
And one thing I just want to clarify too, while our comp plan may be expired in the sense that it's ready for an update, the comp plan does not expire until a new one is adopted. Like our comprehensive plan for the city of Wasilla is its comprehensive plan. And until we have some other comprehensive plan, that comprehensive plan is because it's a law. It has the power of law in the city, both as a matter of statute and code. So yes, I do understand, Crystal, when you say expired, but I just want to make sure everybody is following the comp plan until we have a new comp plan. Okay.
Mayor, Holly, I see that there's really two discussions going on here. And sometimes we're using the discussion in one way or the other. And I agree with Councilman Brown. Planning is very important, because if you don't have a plan, 2033 is going to look really bad. On the other hand, the apart from that is to how you actually implement your plan through your regulations is where I see we have an awful lot of issues that really need to be addressed, which is apart from the plan, which is very important. Okay, and we have to understand how we got to this plan, and we have to redo the plan, but I don't want to be hamstrung on fixing our regulation problems while we're waiting for a new plan to be developed.
I think that's important because the goal is when this ordinance comes out, let's say that the comp plan process is finished after you adopt a Title 16, and you suddenly decide that you actually not only need a commercial, but you need a light commercial district, zoning district, and you haven't had that. We want to create a title that is clean enough, as far as clear enough to be able to take and build that other zoning district and apply our permitting procedures and insert it into a district chart and have all of that flow pretty easily so that it's easy for the commission to work through and execute what you see in that comp plan that's different. So you don't lose work and we're not unbuilding something or deconstructing it to build it up. So we will do our level best to build the title, the first draft, to reflect and the upcoming comprehensive plan process and the presumption that you'll be making changes. And I think Title 16 is always going to be a fluid document because land use and population growth and economic priorities are always going to continue to change. So that'll be something we'll have to find ways to vet that in front of both bodies. So we're holding ourselves accountable. We're exercising the title until you adopt it, so we know how it works. We're going to have hypotheticals. We're going to walk through things. We're going to have, we will practice the code. So you will know and feel confident that a 12-year-old can read and understand and execute the code and move through it comfortably. And that might mean you might need some help in some chapters with, user-friendly handouts, and then we'll build those out. So I think this is not going to be easy. This is going to be making the sausage, but that's the only way you get a clean title that governs something so intrinsic to so many different users, in my opinion.
So, Mr. Johnson, are you okay with the way we're starting? Okay. Mr. Brown?
Oh, me?
Yeah, you.
I disagree.
Uh-oh.
I think the intentions is right on, and I guess we gotta start somewhere, so I guess I can agree we go ahead and start there. But again, after years of being a planning officer, you make the plan, the regulations is what enforce that. The regulation is, we wanna go from here to Palmer, and the regulations is what get you to Palmer. The plan is going to Palmer, regulation get you there. And what I'm hearing is we're gonna make the regulations to get to Palmer without a plan to get to Palmer.
Well, we already have the regulations to Plummer.
We don't redo them, I'm saying, we saying we got too many, we wanna redo them. So I applaud the way you're going with this. I just hope we're careful in not making too many regulations for the sake of reduction and the sake of getting to the 8-year-old. And I say that with humor, but I spent most of the session in Juneau this past year, and I saw regulations being made with no forethought on how those regulations impacted other regulations and how those regulations affected where we as a state wanted to go. They was made in a bubble, with no consideration as to what was going to happen to B, C, D, and E. So I got my regulation through, it's passed. The group I'm catering to is happy with this, but now it has caused other things that's going to affect a lot more issues and stuff. So that's why I don't disagree with you, Holly. I think I applaud where you're going and stuff, but I want us to be careful, looking for brevity, and not end up costing the city money, time, and energy for the sake of brevity.
And with that, it is a really important point too. One thing that I will take from Councilmember Brown's comments, because it is unusual, if we were starting over, if we had incorporated, we would start first with our comprehensive plan and then our regulations. So it's a well taken comment. Here, we're starting in a realm where we are already regulating and enforcing these provisions in the community, and that is already created. So this approach allows us to ensure our procedures are simplified, but we will be sure to understand the fluidity and the impact of the comprehensive plan updates and the changes that may have to come, and make sure we build in efficiencies.
Okay. Mr. Graham?
Great, we'll skip Alina here because she already talked about her 8-year-old, so. So, Simon and I have similar backgrounds as military officers. And Simon is exactly right. You don't put together a bunch of rules without knowing what the plan is. The plan comes first. We have a plan that was supposed to be updated in 2021, a plan that I've been asking for updates to since 2018, and kept being told, oh, we don't need to do that, we'll get to it. This has to be first. We can fix things inside Title 16, but we can't rewrite Title 16 until we know what the comp plan is. This needs to go out first. We need to put money behind hiring one of the engineering firms to go out and put together a new comp plan, and then your role as city attorney is to go through that comp plan and see with that new comp plan where it's going to conflict with what we've got in regulation, and make sure that we have some temporary patches in there to make things happen. But at this point, if we're going to work with Title 16, we need a box of Band-Aids. We don't need to start and rewrite the whole thing, because if we do rewrite the whole thing, then our comp plan goes out the window, and the comp plan is what developers look at. The comp plan is what industry and persons looking to grow with Wasilla they look at the comp plan, they don't look at Title 16. Title 16 is the rules that tell them how they can specifically develop their lot, or that they can or cannot have a bar, or that they can or cannot have parking islands, or that they can't have poplar trees but they can have aspens. That's what Title 16 does. The comp plan tells them this is the direction the city is going. We invite you to come be part of our city if you agree with that direction. And if you agree with that direction, then we have some rules that go along that support moving in that direction. So I have to say, yes, there are things in Title 16 that need to be band-aided, but that's exactly what they need to do, is to be band-aided until we can do our job, which we should have done years ago, and get the comp plan updated. That's where we get the input from the citizens. That's where we get the history from talking to the citizens. That's where we get exactly what the plan is called, a comprehensive plan for moving forward. And that's what we need. Secondly, as you move forward with Title 16, if you are going to do Title 16 first, if you're going to try and do a complete rewrite, I would recommend that you look at the process that we had for the landscape ordinance, which still hasn't come through the Planning Commission, and it's quite a ways away, as my understanding, because they tried to fix the whole thing at once instead of trying to fix a little bit at a time. Title 16 is 93 pages.
Oh my God.
Okay. You bring me a 93-page ordinance a week before you want it, or 2 weeks before you want it approved, I can guarantee you I will bust my butt to make sure that it does not pass, because there just isn't adequate time for us to go through that and to pick it apart with the level that it needs to have. So if you're going to go through Title 16, I mean, there's 93 pages, there's 12 chapters. Do a chapter at a time, maybe, whatever you're going to do, but don't bring forward a full ordinance. After you bring forward, chapter 12, and it goes through the amendments and so on and so forth, then that chapter 12 can either be adopted or set aside for adoption when the whole thing is ready to go. But give the council its due. These people aren't sitting up here because this is the funnest thing that they have to do on a Tuesday night. They're sitting here because they care about the community, and because they care about the community, they're doing their homework on what's going on, and when administration and other actions don't give them time to deal with that and do their homework, that's disingenuous to the community and to the council. And then the other thing I would say, you talked about looking at communities of similar size. There is no community similar to Wasilla if you just look at size. We're what, 10,400 people or so, I think, right now. There's lots of communities out there that are 10,400 people. How many communities are there out there that have a consistent growing pattern? How many people are there? How many communities are there out there of 10,000 people that have 100,000 cars a day going through their downtown? I mean, there has to be more than just saying, well, we're looking at communities comparable in size. No community is going to be completely comparable. There is no mirror image of Wasilla someplace. Thank God, it makes us unique and makes us a fun place to be. But we have to look not just at size, but at some other things. Communities that are growing, communities that are traffic focused, particularly on one single lane, for communities that are space limited when it comes to transportation issues. I mean, there needs to be a broader net, I think. And I'm not saying that's not what you're thinking, but that's not what you said. So I just wanted to get it out in the open. But to recap, I would agree that we're headed in the wrong direction. Comp plan is where we need to be focusing our efforts. That doesn't mean we ignore Chapter 16 along the way, But the comp plan is where we need to be focusing our efforts so that we don't end up writing the comp plan around chapter 16. That's not the way it works. You write the comp plan and then you write the rules to make sure that the comp plan takes us in the right direction. Thank you.
Rubio.
That's enough.
I was actually gonna sit here and say that I agree with both of you right now, but now I'm gonna change my mind. Just give me a second. So I think really, I do understand that this is still the plan, the comp plan. I understand that, but our Title 16 is preventing local builders to come in and build, our new businesses to be flourishing and growing. We need to button up, Band-Aid, whatever you want to do to Title 16 enough to get the businesses and local builders moving now. Now, not tomorrow. So then put Title 16 on hold, right? Because in real life, you can't really just stop everything. You have to keep business moving and come back, change this, decorate it, whatever you want to do, and then revise Title 16 to match it. So in that sense, I would love to, in a perfect world, hit pause and we just fix everything right now, but we can't. Business is open, but it's not right now. So let's get it open to our local builders, our new businesses, our businesses that are already existing and wanting more businesses next to them. Let's get that flourishing again, statistically. And then let's fix this.
Okay, one thing I do think I'm a little confused, because when I just want to, because and the only reason why is the rewrite is to do that. So when I say the rewrite, so we look at, it's to create a procedure where we use use permits and conditional use permits only, so people know what to anticipate and can actually determine so if they want to do something on their property and they're going through the permitted uses, they can say, okay, I get what I can do, and that's a use permit, I get what I can do with a conditional use permit, so they know what they're looking at, and then stepping back those provisions to reflect something that can be understood, and to the extent there's something that is creating a loophole or creating confusion or is not, it's usually procedural. So that's one of the things I will say about Title 16. It's usually a procedural component. We have exemptions. Do we understand what those exemptions are? The process for the exemptions maybe doesn't make a lot of sense when compared to the process of the permit, where the notice provision is, where the timing provision is off and it's creating, so there's all these little weird nuances in Title 16 that are creating the problems Councilmember Rubio is talking about, right? So I want to fix those, which requires what we consider a total rewrite of the code, because you cannot touch one section without the other one, because they're all intertwined enough. So for me, my one recommendation is bite size is important. It's how we get a lot of things done. Bite size on land use is detrimental and leads to codes that are inconsistent and create a lot of frustration and confusion for users. So what I think I'm hearing is, don't go and start from scratch and build a new Title 16 yet. So, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I think I'm hearing. Fix these problems, but we need to get the comp plan done before we delve into the actual uses. And so that component of what you're doing in multifamily or what you're doing in residential or zoning, put that on hold until we have the direction from the comp plan. So I think if that is what you guys are saying, I understand that. Is that, so I will just start, so I really am not trying to be facetious. I think, yes?
Yeah, it is,
Okay.
because, they both said it already, and I understand it too, and I think others do too. This is how we built Title 16 first, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
This is
The couplet is how we wrote Title 16.
The comp plan.
Or the comp plan, sorry.
Oh.
The comp plan is how we wrote Title 16, right?
No, I don't know that that's true. I think you wrote Title 16 as part of
Long before that?
incorporation long before, and then over time, you've sort of amended and revised it piece by piece.
And so it's ever changing.
It's ever changing,
Okay,
and the
so that's
provisions have been. So you have added, in the last 2-3 years, But the comp plan came first because comp plans, when you incorporate as a community, the comp plan process is part of your, like, sort of what you bring to the local boundary commission, or it's sort of in your first sort of baby steps as a municipality. So
Her question, it
Yes.
should have been comp plan 16.
Title 16 reflects your comp plan.
I think
Is what we're
it's a
saying.
good question. Your code and your comp plan, I don't know. I think your code may come first and your comp plan is the process that starts, because they need a code to set up your council members to vote on the comp plan. So your code establishes the laws that set up the bodies that make the decisions to create these plans, what comp plans, and there's other plans. So first code, then plan.
So we can button up 16 a little bit, fluff it up, keep our businesses moving, right?
I don't know, I'm worried that my little bit won't be council and the
Not
commission's
90
little bit, and then you
pages.
guys will be
Not
like,
90 pages.
so 90 I don't expect your title to be 90 pages.
90 pages it
So-
doesn't take 90 pages to keep business moving, does it? 90 pages?
So what I would say is this is a big Title 16. When my reading of this is that it is heavy on the regulation as compared to any other municipalities that I've worked with. It's heavy on regulation. I am not making a quality or judgment call on the regulation or the importance of it or where the components are. That's just my observation. It's more than I'm used to seeing. I do think the micro components of the regulation can wait until after the comp plan. I think the whole code has to be revised as one body in order to put the Band-Aid on. That's how the Band-Aid goes in my opinion. And it's not that, there will be sections I will be like, look, you guys adopted that at this time, and we don't have to touch it because it doesn't affect process. It's clean, the language is fine, we won't touch it. And I think the goal here from sort of this side of the table was, I think we can wait and we can let the commission do what they want with the district use chart. In the meantime, you guys can start looking and understanding that and walking through it and getting comments. But we don't, as we're writing Title 16, we don't necessarily have to delve into what do we want to do with assisted living homes. We can wait until the comp plan's done. And I think that's reflecting, okay. And I'm sorry if I'm a little, I just want to make sure I have crystal clear understanding of my directions.
I love it.
Holly, the rewrite of 16, will it conflict with the comprehensive plan?
No, and to the extent we were headed in a direction where we're going to have some awkwardness, I think commission and council members have just now flushed out and kind of very intentionally laid out those two paths. So the only place we're going to have a little bit of discomfort, I anticipate, is we are going to eliminate this multi-tiered permitting process, at least in the draft ordinance. And that means I will be looking at an administrative approval on your district chart and saying, well, we're getting rid of that and we're just having a use permit, or we're just having an administrative approval. So what do I make that? So for now, I am just going to make it the thing closest to what it is. That's what I'm gonna do. So you're not gonna get a chart that has permitted outright uses, but then I'm just going to move it closest to, so for example, I'm gonna use accessory uses. Right now, administrative approvals are required in every district, except for industrial, which requires a use permit. I won't say that I fully understand the intent of that, but I'm going to step up accessory uses in industrial to a conditional use permit, because it now requires a use permit. And that is in essence a conditional use permit, because the use permit has the same notice requirements and can be elevated to the commission. And then all of the other ones, I will create a use permit, but the use permit won't have notice, so they'll stay at AA. So that one won't change very much, so I'll just tweak them and then I'll walk you through the tweaks and we can see if there's anything you want to change before the comp plan.
Mr. Johnson?
Okay, we're starting to lose me here. Maybe I'm just daft or whatever. Okay. The procedures that we've got for administrative approval, the procedures and rules for use permit, the procedures that we have for conditional use permit, the procedures that we have to exclude or getting a variance. I'm having a real hard time understanding what those procedures are with respect to a comprehensive plan. A procedure has nothing to do with the plan. It is the implementation. Now, if you were to say the chart and the district chart, that has everything to do with a comprehensive plan, but not the procedures. And what I'm hearing right now from businesses, our procedures are the problem. We should be able to fix how do you do an administrative procedure so that a 12-year-old could understand it, so that 2 years from now or next year when we have a comprehensive plan, businesses today could follow it, the people today could follow it, and it'll still work with the comprehensive plan that we will produce in the future. Now, or am I totally wrong? Or
No, Councilmember Johnson, I think you could join Councilmember Brown, Rubio, and Graham, who all agree with you, and I think that I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, like that is it. So what I think, we're all sort of, it appears we have sort of, and we'll see where we end up, but, you know, this sort of consensus that the comp plan is very important, and it needs to take priority in setting use. And that is something I think that the administration is hearing and certainly has been moving in that direction. I mean, one of the things we do have to remember is even if you wanted to make a comp plan rewrite your priority during COVID, you would have had a very difficult time getting the tools and resources and attention that you needed to do that. And it would have, not only would it have been difficult, I truly believe it would have been impossible. Emergency operation plans were the focus of the day for just about everybody. Providing resources, grants, funding. So I just want to say that on behalf of the city, because I do think this is a time we're seeing a lot of communities looking at their comp plans when they didn't have that luxury in that 3-year period. So that said, I think that we are looking to procedure. The procedure is the most important part from the legal perspective. It's what sort of drove the administration and legal to start asking these questions. So I think everybody's on the same page. Unfortunately, nothing lives in its perfect little bubble. And for me, procedure will run into use. And the places we see it, for example, is the district use chart. So if I clean up procedure, which involves the city having multi-layers of administrative approval, use permits, and conditional use permits, which are intertwined and do not allow a person coming into your community to say, I'm going to buy this piece of land. I wonder what I'm going to have to do to be able to develop it in X way. Oh, look, I'm going to need a conditional use permit. Oh, look, I'm going to need an administrative approval permit. Oh, it's just allowed outright. We want them to be able to open the book, look at that, and immediately identify those pieces. Now, that doesn't mean that when they see it's a conditional use permit, they then will know, boy, I'm gonna have to engage with the planning department. This is a conditional use permit. I am going to have to engage in an application process. But we want to make that process easy. We want to make it, and that doesn't mean that easy doesn't mean approved necessarily, right? But we want to give them the tools. So that I understand as my marching orders, our marching orders right now, is to create that user-friendly procedure. Councilmember Johnson, right? And then to the extent we bump up against use, previously, so when we started this discussion, I was just going to go in and try to make those uses sort of reflect what I was hearing. And what I'm hearing from everybody is, don't do that. We're going to get our comp plan in place. Just make sure that the procedure, do what you have to do to get it to where the procedure can function and be corrected and remedied. And we will turn our attention to that use more substantively after we have a comp plan update. Then the only thing I would add to that is I do think the commission, because the comp plan process will be looking for this, the commission can start looking at these uses and flagging ones that maybe don't make a lot of sense. And you can use your current comp plan. Having spent time in your current comp plan, there's lots of I think there's parts of that plan regarding districts that is not going to, I would not expect to see a change. I would expect to see that stay, just based on the nature of the language.
Nikki?
I just want to add something here.
Okay.
I just want to add that we just completed the economic development strategy. And if you use that as a guide, like one of our priorities is the airport. And if I had somebody come that wanted to open a convenience store at the airport, that's not allowed. So if the airport is a priority and we know that we're going to attract people to come out to the airport to do manufacturing or a data center or something that we've not identified, they'll be questioning how serious we are because we haven't really thought through that. So the comp plan is a great place to reference, but even in our comp plan, we don't go into the details of aviation. But now that we've got the economic development and we've got our 3 priorities that we're focused on for 5 years, we need to make sure that this is a fluid enough document that when that new warehouse manufacturing company comes to us, we can say, here's how it's gonna be permitted, and here's the eight-year-old comprehension of how they do it without calling us at home at night at 9 p.m. So hopefully that helps. We're not too far behind where we should be, but we need to keep in mind if our priorities is to drive the economy, let's use the tool we just paid for. And then this will come behind it and it will become very comprehensive and a usable document. But the plan is only as good as a procedure. And right now, people come in, they say, I'm gonna open a automotive sales shop and I need a use permit, and then we lose them. And we know that because we're tracking data. I can show you in our database right now over the last 3 years, there are 19 permits that all the communication is going that way and nothing is coming this way. So they're either not opening their emails and saying, I haven't submitted a full package, or they're not understanding us. But that is something we gotta track because you should not have that many permits in a system that are not having any activity of anything coming back to us because they don't understand what that means. There's a huge disconnect in the procedure.
Okay, Nikki?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm comfortable where you're going, even though it's changed, seemed like it changed a few times. I agree with Alina totally that we need to get something in place. I think if we waited until the comp plan is updated and then we do, sometimes, things take forever. And like you said, we do have a comp plan. It's not like it's expired or and there's still some good stuff in it, and there's probably nothing bad in it that's going to hurt us to continue and change our procedures. So I think you're on the right track, and let's do it.
And one thing I will say too, because it did change, I think it changed to make sure that we're separating the use from the procedure enough to make sure the comp plan leads on the use. But I think realistically, it will be more difficult to do that when I'm actually going, when we're moving through the procedures. We will make sure we flag it when we run into a use and we make a decision for your consideration. And that way, at that time, council can say, we want to wait until we do the comp plan, or maybe not if, for example, Deputy Administrator Nygaard explains that this is going to have real life consequences to the airport. And so those types of changes, because while we move forward with the comp plan, we are changing the code and uses and the parameters. I mean, the city of Wasilla just recently updated their code to include a short-term rental, provisions and process that has very real, impacts right now. So this will treat those changes in a way that you are aware of them. And then council and the commission can decide, do they want to wait or not wait? And that way we don't get, I don't want to get sort of paralyzed by, oh my goodness, this is a use. And I don't think I'm not supposed to. So this will allow us to that flexibility. So I'm going to change one more time, but not really. I mean, it's really.
Ian.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, my original comments too said, I think the comp plan is again the most important thing. Though again, it took 2 years last time to update it. So I think with what Alina's saying is, it's like, hey, while we're updating this, because obviously it needs to do, what currently can we do to start opening things up for business? One of the big items we already have on the table is landscaping. The commission's already started looking at it. The issue has been that we keep looking at it as a whole. And this might be some direction for our next meetings, is just saying, hey, it's, 60 pages long right now? I don't know. Break it up in the next 4 meetings.
Let's do 100.
Is it 100? I haven't even counted it because of it. And just say, hey, let's break it up into 5 meetings, 6 meetings, whatever it's going to take, and just start reviewing it so that we can start making at least some changes. I think that there are some things on the district use chart I would like to see that we update as well. It sounds like the commission has more than enough on its plate right now that we can start tackling while this comp plan's being updated. But at the end of the day, as the Title 16 is a very, very fluid document, and as the comp plan updates, we'll continuously go back and update it as well. But I would, again, maybe like to start seeing from you some of those things for us to review. District use, but I think landscape needs to be the first thing, because from talking with people in this community, that is the most common item that people are complaining about, is our district, is our landscaping, and then the second thing being the confusing aspect of our uses. I almost wonder if we should have administrative approval and then it's commission approval, because in essence, that's what a conditional use is it's going to the commission for approval at that point. So simplify it, there should be 2, and that's what we already actually approved as a commission, so.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Are we ready to exit the committee of the whole?
Oh, can I say one more?
Yes, one more thing.
Okay, one more, okay, just one more thing. So, on the whole landscaping plan, it has been in its own little community down there for too long. Bring it up, the ranks, in the sense of, I'm a patient person, but I think it's been down at that planning committee for over a year now. And like you said, planning commission hasn't even had a chance to touch it, I believe. You haven't dug into it?
We've had 4 meetings and done nothing.
Nothing. So I think we should, I mean, I don't know how to ask that to move up. I don't know if that is even something possible, but how we get more
And I can speak to
involved in it.
And I feel, one thing I should say is the commission has wanted to address it. And part of me has been, we should not create more regulations, adopt more regulations while we are currently we have an acting planner, but we do not have a permanent planner in place. And we have these regulations that, I think may be better suited for consideration as a sort of blue ribbon plan, which many of the provisions included in the landscaping ordinance came from best practices in blue ribbon plans. So, and that is one of the reasons why I think that's one of the places I'm hoping for the commission to really consider the difference between what we require and mandate versus what we encourage and incentivize. And those are 2 different things in communities, and the codes that I see Wasilla are pulling from areas that are traditionally or in the communities where I think a lot of these provisions have come from are not mandates. They're recommendations. So there's a lot to do. So we needed to know if we were going to break into Title 6, if we were going to rewrite Title 16 in its entirety, then we would start with very basic provisions regarding landscaping, creating a plan that is, sort of a best practices plan, and then walking through that with the commission, and then looking and pulling pieces of the landscaping plan that has been proposed into a simpler plan. So that whole process, we can start that process, but I wanted this process first, because that way we're considering the ordinance as one. So I do think there is benefits to looking at Title 16 as a title. I think that has not been done before in the city of Wasilla, and I think that there has been consequences as a result. So, but that doesn't mean we don't take bite-sized pieces of that title once we have the bones. So I understand it's a priority, so I think that will be something I'll talk to the commission about at the next meeting, and we can vote and decide if we want to prioritize that and get recommendations to council in a separate ordinance. But I had intended to ask that we stay any substantive wide sweeping changes to Title 16 until we get the procedure, until we address that procedure in the title. But for, things that need to be, yeah, like true Band-Aids, like not, Band-Aids where it's like, oh my goodness, we said we mandated some conduct that is not possible in that area, or something very extreme, but otherwise, let's get the procedure fixed, let's get Title 16, that piece of it taken care of, and as part of that, these basic landscaping provisions, and creating, so that would be my recommendation, is no more substantive changes until we have procedural changes. I think that has created some, which would mean I understand that my obligation then is to move extremely quickly. And we already have a draft pretty much done, but for these pieces where I felt uncomfortable moving forward with something that was based in policy without the guidance of the commission and the council.
Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. Chair Seals for the Planning Commission. Melvin and I have been on the Planning Commission for several years, and we were dealt the deadly landscaping hand from the very beginning. So maybe in the last 4 meetings, for some of our newer members, we didn't work on this, because over the years, even before the committee was established, we had asked the previous planner to simplify, and it got more complicated, and more complicated. So I would love to send something to you, Councilmember Rubio, that was acceptable to the public and to the business community. But with the previous planner we had nothing but continual more and more complication. So as far as not getting anything done in the last 4 meetings, I can agree with that, because any action on what was before us was erroneous to the business community and the citizens of this city. So to pass that forward, it just wouldn't have been fair to business or the city. So I would love to pass something forward to you that was 8-year-old simple, 25 pages. I was laughed at 25 pages, but I think 20 pages would probably just about take care of it. So this landscaping issue has been dealt with by the Planning Commission even before I was on it. So we would love to move something forward to the City Council, but I can't move something forward that's detrimental to the city. Thank you.
Holly, do you want to address the memorandum?
So one thing, I think we're gonna have lots of time together on Title 16 moving forward over the next couple months. So one of the things that you have, Zoe prepared a memo that includes a hypothetical. And the hypothetical is, it's a simple question: may I keep a horse on my property in the single family residential 1 or single residential 2 zoning districts? And if so, what type of permit do I need to have, and what standards do I need to follow? I would like each of you, and I'm not going to do it here with you tonight, I feel like we had a really active participation, but I would like you to walk through this. We've given you the code provisions that you need to do so, and I want you to come up with the answers. And I want to see, one of the things that I think that going through this process will help you understand how individuals who are trying to navigate Title 16 regarding what they can and cannot do on their property. It'll give us an understanding of what they're doing, how they're using your code on a very simple level. And I think that you will not all come up with the same answer. And I think everybody here is very intelligent, very capable, and so I might be wrong. You might all come up with the same answer, but I think it's possible that you won't. And that will demonstrate for us, when you're looking at the provisions, it'll give you that feeling of, I know what I need to understand where I'm going. So it'll ground you. So we were gonna do it together, it was one of the things we were considering, but I think, given that where we're headed, just take it home, sort of walk through it. And I will send out a reminder with each commission and the council when we're working on Title 16 next. I will make sure that that Zoe or I remind you that your homework is due. So. And that's all I have. I think we really did get the direction we need. I feel, Zoe, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I don't. The thorough comments we were extremely helpful and are going to helpfully guide us going forward.
I think we can get to work.
Okay, is there a motion to exit committee of the whole?
I motion to exit committee of the whole.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Seals and seconded by Councilmember Graham to exit committee of the whole. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, we are out of committee of the whole.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Attorney Wells, is everybody on the same page, or do we need a motion? To direct the city attorney to?
Administration can direct her to go in that direction.
I think she knew.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody's on the same page that we are directing the city attorney to go forth and prosper. Okay, we're now at audience comments. It's time for members of the public to share their views with council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Is there anyone present who would like to address the city council?
You didn't beat you to it. You could have got there first.
Absolutely.
You've got more to say than me.
Can I have this?
Peanut gallery? No more comments.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Please state your name, first and last name, and you have 3 minutes.
Verne, Rupright city resident. Wow. There's always a lot of work to do in administrating a city. It's obvious, right? I mean, the plan, you gotta remember one thing. The plan was done in '96. Finally, the next mayor came in November of '08 and went to work on this plan. And his smiling younger face is in there. Because it had to be updated. Because we had an attitude of, oh, well, fiddly-doo, I'll do what I want. And the town looked at it, and we relied on a lot of complaints. We had a junkyard right downtown. Actually, it was repair shop, and it was my old neighbor who's now deceased, Kurt Schreiber. We had all kinds of things. We opened that up. We had to do a lot. So the grape tap could thrive, and the clock tower could actually be a business, and all these other kind of things. It's a lot of hard work, and I understand it. But the comp plan is, and I share with both the senior officer, Mr. Brown, and the little more junior officer, Mr. Graham, the same background as an operations officer at one time. But I had the benefit of being an operations sergeant too, so I learned the real groundwork of it. So I understand how you have the strategic plan is this in a sense, this is your strategic plan. How do you implement that strategic plan? And that's the operational side or the tactical side. Okay, I gotta write an ops order. Okay, the strategic plan says, this is our goal. Now what I gotta do is write those orders to get us there. Think of it like Patton moving the Third Army. It's the same kind of concept. So I think all the comments were good tonight. I think everybody was getting a grasp. It's just that you can't take Title 16, for example, which is the way you implement this here, right? Just going, oh, well, I'll just do it this way. I mean, there has to be some guidance in there. And sure, Title 16 has always been kind of a nightmare because some people are happy with this, some aren't. A couple other people with some influence are complaining, they go back and forth, and it's just the way government is. You can't make everybody happy all at once. So just got to keep that in mind. You got a big job ahead of yourself. A number of people have been in government, around government, so many darn years that it's just nice to be away from it. But, because your head spins after a while. But the comp plan is key, because it is tied to funding and your credibility. And my last statement is, the last thing you want to go back to is the days of the indubitable Senator Ben Stevens saying that's just a strip mall full of valley trash out there. And that was just, I don't know who he thought he was. We had fast-growing pains in this town. So keep that in mind. You don't want to go back in that direction. Thank you very much, and carry on.
Okay, anyone else want to speak to the council? Oh, okay, we will close audience comments and bring you back to the dais. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to the commission and then, of course, the council. It was really neat to have our first joint meeting tonight. I think just sitting here listening to it was really productive, and look forward to the continuation of this project. Review board tomorrow, be here testing the ballot tabulators that will be used in the election, 1 o'clock here at City Hall in Council Chambers. And then we'll see you all next regular meeting, September 11th. And just another little plug, because I can't help it, if there's lots of work for the Planning Commission, remember under code, you can meet twice a month. So.
And apparently there's enough work. Madam Attorney.
I want to thank everybody for participating. I know I put you all on the spot. I really do appreciate it. And that's all. No other comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Brown. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have to stand corrected. My super deputy clerk just reminded me review board is day after tomorrow. So sorry about that. 1 o'clock though still.
So you're giving false information?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot.
Okay, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for everybody's participation. And again, I leave with, we're here for 10,400 citizens.
Councilmember Johnson.
No comment.
Councilmember Rubio.
Just want to say this was fun and to see those faces. And Holly, I would not want to be you right now so much. But truly appreciate you and can't wait to see what the outcome looks like.
Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did hear you say something pretty interesting, Holly. You said, well, you've already got a draft of Title 16. Since this is the body, all of these people are going to be the ones that are going to be approving that draft and approving whatever your final product is. It'd be nice if you shared it with us, as soon as possible, even if it's just in draft stage, so that you can get comments and see where the questions are and see if the directions that we thought we were expressing are indeed being there. So, and I'm also hoping that the draft is going to be about fixing Title 16, not rewriting Title 16. So, thanks everybody for being here. It's nice to see you here. Former Mayor Rupright, nice to have the history behind it and then know what's going on. Thank you.
Councilmember Biglock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I want to thank Holly. Yeah, you always are always willing to get beat up there. We appreciate that. But we do thank you for your hard work and listening to all of us. But I think we're going in the right direction. And I appreciate everyone's participation, and I think we all are on the same page, that we want our businesses to be able to conduct business more easily and feel good about the city. Like I said, it was fun for me to get out of the Planning Commission because they were just coming in complaining about the same things, and we just didn't seem to get anywhere. So I'm really thrilled that we are remedying that, so thank you.
Commissioner Crofton.
Thank you, Mayor. Holly, yes, thank you so much. I know, again, like Zelak said, we beat you up a lot, but you have a lot of work for us, and I would also like to see that draft. Again, as a whole, I think it's going to be hard, but I think at first what we need to do is look at it as a whole and see where do we want to start first. Ms. Nygaard, I think you said we didn't really have anything on our next agenda. If I can suggest a committee of the whole, I'd like to start, I'd like to either look at that whole draft, or we say, hey, we're gonna go back to this landscape development. And I think the original comment was 4 meetings in 4 sections, and so if we wanna do that, then I would say we just take the first quarter of it, and only look at that first quarter as a committee of the whole, and we can start, I guess, going line by line on it, or page by page, however the commission would like to do it at that point. So that would be my comment for our next meeting, and then as well, again, to move things as quickly as possible as government can do. I think we should have our second meeting in the month, because we obviously have enough work to keep us going on that there. And then otherwise, council, it was good to meet with everybody. It was, I think, really, really good discussion, and I'm glad that we're to know that our 2 biggest bodies are really on the same page, working towards the same goals here. So it was really good to meet with you guys. Thanks so much.
Commissioner Cottle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really like the direction that we're starting out with. I think there's a lot of good things that are going to come down the pike with this for all of the citizens of the city of Wasilla and future businesses and citizens of the city. And with the direction that we're starting out, I'm really feeling positive about having a better, what's the word I want to use? A nicer time on the planning commission than Councilman Wheelock had. I think there's a lot of really good possibilities here, and I'm looking forward to working with the planning commission and with the council. Thank you.
Commissioner Stafford.
Thank you. No additional comments at this time.
Commissioner Seals.
Yeah, this was a great chance tonight to all of us see whether we were going to be on the same page or not. And I'm very thankful that we're all really close on the same page. Going over the current landscaping plan line by line, there's a lot of cross-off to do on that. So I'd be very interested, although September is kind of taken up by moose hunting. Melvin and I have put several years into this. I'm looking forward to striking line by line on the landscape proposal. Thank you, everybody, tonight. It was a pleasure.
Commissioner Melvin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to thank everybody for the comments, and thank the concerned people for helping spearhead the conversation. And look forward to working with everybody. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now, we are, I will just,
One thing I just want to make clear, I have started a draft, I have a draft, but this was an important component in completing the draft. I will likely not have a draft of Title 16 for you at the next commission meeting, but I will be working, I understand the prioritization, and I will, but I did not, because I needed to. I will continue to work diligently as soon as they're ready for your consideration in draft form. I will not wait until they're.
Holly, do you want the executive session
I don't think that we need it. I feel like we were actually pretty transparent about all of the
Okay.
various issues, but is there a?
It's up to you.
I don't feel like we need it. I wouldn't like.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for attending, and you know, it gives you a very positive outlook of where the city's going. And you know, I've said from the beginning, it takes a team, and it does. So it's great that everybody is on the same page at least. One may be at the top and one at the bottom, but it's still the same page. So thank you all for coming. And with nothing further to come before this committee, we are adjourned at 8:29.
Here, I'll get it.
We do.
You got it?
Yep.
Oh, dear.